Okay, there we go. So if I do this right, here we go. And so now everybody should be able to see my screen.
We can, yes, good, good.
Okay. I will suggest to everybody there is no need to go crazy making notes. I've got a slide deck that is on my website for this seminar, and I'll get the link out to everybody. Well, matter of fact, the only thing you will have to scribble down will be the link. So bear with me here. I just have to share this. There we go. Can everybody see that split star processing workflow?
Yes.
Yep.
Can you make out the link at the top?
Yeah.
That's the address of the.
Oh, there.
PDF.
Yep.
So if you scribble that down, you won't have to scribble too much else down for the evening.
And in theory, if we make a recording of this available to people, they would have this page available.
That is correct. This page will stay up on my website.
Any chance you can copy and paste that into the chat? Then I can just copy and paste it.
That sounds like a plan. Let's see here.
Okay, that's an even better idea.
Yeah, we hope. 1 second. Okay, why can't I see chat? Oh, wait now.
At the bottom, probably because you're screen sharing.
That is why I just have to get to the right dialogue here. Okay, so to everyone, oops, type a message. Okay, there is the link. Let me know if that shows up, folks.
Yep, there it is.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Blair.
So that will get you the document, and you should be able to go from there. So now I will turn that off, because unless I run into a memory lapse, which is entirely possible, I shouldn't need it again. There we go. So what I'm going to walk people through tonight is I'm going to touch on a couple of tools in ImagesPlus, and then I'm going to sort of share what I usually use as a processing workflow, if you will. And I'll point out why I do it, what the advantages are, and what some of the disadvantages can be as well. I am assuming that everyone has downloaded the ImagesPlus package and has at least had a chance to open it and see it. So just to give everybody, okay, I have to, bear with me, I have to shrink down the video thumbnails there. There we go. So here is ImagesPlus. And when you don't have any files open, this is the menu selections you have. Generally, you have two toolbars, one across the top, and the mask and special functions toolbar is on the side over here. All of these items can be accessed from the menus that will show up as well, so you don't have to worry about it too much, but at any rate, they're there. We're going to open a file. You can obviously do it with file open, or click the usual icon. And this is a picture of the Cygnus wall in the North American Nebula, and we'll take a look at that. We'll use that as an image for this evening. Now, bear with me a second. I just have to stop sharing for 1 minute. I may have just gotten an email from Ali that I have to respond to. Please bear with me. Okay, that's. No, I lied. Okay, so this will give you an idea of the menu that shows up once you open an image. So I opened the Great Wall image. And now you see all of the image processing menus as well one other night. And I do plan on doing a session specifically on that one evening coming up. This particular one is on how to process this particular image and a lot of other images. So first thing we're going to want to do to an image is we're going to want to stretch it to the point where we can see some detail in the image. In this particular image, about all you can see, at least on my screen, is stars. Various colors, but you can see stars. So there are several stretching tools. Ignore these. We have a histogram contrast stretch, brightness and contrast. levels adjustment, microcurves, which is ImagesPlus specific implementation of a curves adjustment. It takes a little getting used to, but once you do, it's not too bad. We have various general stretching, development processing stretch, that hyperbolic stretch, and some other processing that goes on in the background. And then we have the one that I typically use, which is ArcSine. Now, unlike some other packages, the ArcSine stretch in ImagesPlus is exceedingly flexible. Unfortunately, that also means it can be a little complicated, but we'll go through it here tonight because it is one of the best implementations I have ever found of an ArcSine stretch. So this is the ArcSine stretch window here. I'm just going to shrink this down a bit. There we go. And ignore this prescale section for just a moment. This section here controls the stretch. So power, the further, the gentleman that wrote this, Mike Unsold, has an interesting view on things. What happens is when you look at the ArcSine stretch, the number that actually controls how much the image gets stretched is what is backward from what most people would think. So what I mean by that is when the number gets smaller, the stretch gets bigger. So Mike reflected that in his control. Darker is all the way over to the right, and the image gets lighter as you slide it to the left. Mike is a signal processing guy, as am I. That's our day jobs. And when he wrote ImagesPlus, he originally wrote all of these with the sliders telling you what was going on. And it makes perfect sense if you do processing for a living. If you don't, it's completely backward from what you would think. So at any rate, you'll notice it's labeled darker and lighter. So as you slide the power slider over, it will brighten up the image. So there is the North American Nebula. This is the Gulf of Mexico area, and this is Mexico. This shape here, which looks a little like an upside down bird at the moment, that's the Great Wall. So a couple of things you want to do whenever you're stretching an image, and it doesn't matter whether you're using ImagesPlus, PixInsight, any other package, including Photoshop, you want to pay careful attention to the histogram. So if we open up the histogram right now, and we wait a second for it to calculate, one of the very first things you will notice is the histogram. So as I said, this is the black end of the image, and you do not want to clip that very much at all. Matter of fact, you don't want to clip it at all. You'd like to see some separation. Bear with me, just checking to see if this young lad has sent me an email here. He was supposed to, and it doesn't look like he has. Okay. So what we're going to do next now, we've slid the power slider over so that you can see some of the nebula. You can obviously see this area that is almost completely clipped. And I'm going to show a couple of tools here. I would dearly love to be able to point to my screen, but since I can't, you notice this area down here. Oops, before my toolbar came up, right down here.
Yeah.
That tells you the red, green, and blue pixel values on an 8-bit scale. This area tells you the luminance value on a 16-bit scale. This is the XY position. This is the zoom. See, we're only zoomed to 20% at the moment. And this is the full pixel size of the image. This particular image is 5035 by 3300. So as we look over in this area of the image, if you come down and look at this, you will see that it's showing 0, right? That is clipped. There's detail in there, but it's all been lost. So we're going to fix that. I'm going to slide this down a bit here. And we're going to fix that by taking this background weight slider, and we're going to slide it again to the left. So as we slide it to the left, you'll notice the histogram is coming up, and you're starting to see more and more detail in these areas. Slide it over a little more. And now you'll notice that the histogram no longer looks clipped, right? You have a normal looking histogram. But that's only the luminance, and it's only part of the story. You want to check all 3 color channels as well. So we'll look at the red histogram, and lo and behold, red is still clipped. You notice that? So that means we have to slide the background weight slider over some more. We want to take all 3 color channels out of clipping. We're still not out on red. Now red is out of clipping. Green should also now be out of clipping, and blue is still clipped. So now we have to slide it some more to take blue out of clipping. And blue is just a little clipped there, as you can see.
When you're doing this, Blair, is it still adjusting all of the colors, but
Yeah.
you're only seeing one of them, or are you
Yes.
individually?
No, it's adjusting all of the colors, and I'm only showing, if you look at the histogram diagram here, you'll notice I've got blue selected.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, are you just adjusting blue or are you
No.
adjusting everything?
No, I'm adjusting everything. There is a way
Okay.
to adjust just a given color, and that is these 3 buttons up here. We'll get
Gotcha.
into those on a later session. So
Perfect.
now
Thank
you can see that blue, red, green, and luminance are all unclipped, with
Good.
blue being just barely unclipped.
I got a question
can
for
see.
you, Blair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, when I slide mine over, it goes down, but then it levels off about a quarter of the way up. Like it doesn't unclip it like what it's shown like yours there now.
The reason that is probably happening is this is an image you took, I assume?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, now, do you have, so the image is probably a stacked image?
Yeah.
Okay, I would be
31.
willing to bet you, did you dither it when you stacked it?
Yes, I did.
Now, if you take a look around the outside of that image, you will see a darker area.
Yeah.
That's a stacking artifact, and you have to crop that out first,
Yeah. I
right?
know.
Because that's got all sorts of black in it because it didn't average much there. It might have only had 1 or 2 frames.
Okay.
And that's what's causing that. You want to use this tool right here. You click that, and then you can click and drag in the image, and it will make a copy of the section that you just highlighted. And if you do that so stretch it, see where the extents of your image are, then undo the stretch, and then crop out the area you want, and I suspect you'll see a more normal looking histogram.
Would you really have to undo the crop or the
You don't
stretch?
have to. The reason for undoing the crop is that once you do the crop, the reason for undoing the stretch, once you do the crop, you've locked the stretch in. So you can't vary that stretch anymore on the crop. So thus I usually just quickly stretch the image, find out where all the artifacts are, just hold my finger on the screen sort of thing. And then I will crop that area out and then process from there. So did that look a little more normal, Fabian, after you did that?
Yeah, I'm just doing it right now.
I had already cropped this image, by the way, which is why it's not showing up on mine. Just to give everyone an idea of what Fabian is talking about there, if I go up 1 here, whoops, that's 2. That was 3 levels up, bear with me. And I look at my stacked image. And we apply that same crop, or the same stretch rather. You see the black up here and on the side. That's an artifact of stacking. And if you take a look, Fabian, I'm assuming this is the sort of thing you're seeing? Yeah. So what happens is, what I do is I keep track of where this point is. And then I'll go over and I'll turn on that tool. Now what I'm doing over at this point, I've just got my finger on the screen so I can see where it is. Then I'm going to undo the stretch. And now I'll crop that area out. And if I do that, and it catches up, and we shut that down. Now when I apply that stretch, we should see the normal looking histogram that we were looking at a minute ago, as you can see. And all I've done is I've cropped out that black area. Did you get it cropped?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, histogram look normal now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's generally what it looks like when you have stacking artifacts, and you always want to crop those out. You don't have to crop those out, by the way, before you stretch. It just, if you don't, the histogram will never look like this. It will always do that flattening down here because it's showing you the black areas that are the artifacts. And as long as you don't mind knowing, as long as you know where your histogram edge is, it's okay to do all your stretching and then crop. But generally, until you're really used to it, you generally have to take care of that manually and do exactly what I did to get that to work properly.
And you want all three colors down, right?
Exactly. Now, bear with me a second. The gentleman's email just came through. Yeah, okay, I see what I typed in wrong. Bear with me one sec. I'm just going to send Ali an email so he can join us. Jerry, if you don't mind entertaining everyone for just a minute, I do apologize, but I did say I would send this to him. So just bear with me a sec.
Well, I'm sure they'll mind my entertaining them, so I don't know.
I don't know. He could do a song. You do a pretty good song and dance there.
Well, I haven't been consuming the right liquids this evening to do that.
I'm so not going there. Okay, bear with me while I send this email off. And then Ali can join us as well. Ali is a young gentleman who has an interest in astronomy in general and astrophotography in particular. And he's about to join the RASC, so I told him I would send him the details and he can join us and go from there. So bear with me just a second.
Jerry, do you have time for a quick question?
Sure.
Any chance you'd be interested in showing a Nina demonstration at some, or not Nina, K-Stars at some point? I know you did a little bit of one, but I tried it because I knew it was kind of all one package.
Right.
And I'm completely lost. I can't figure out why I can't connect anything. So I was just curious if it was something you'd be interested in doing.
Okay, we could do that as a group.
Yeah, another night, like not
yeah.
tonight, but yeah.
Yeah, I might talk to you separately in advance
Sure.
of that, just to make it make sure it's not a non sequitur, that something actually does, you can progress, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Hey folks, sorry about that. So now we've got an image. Sorry to interrupt, Jerry. Now we have an image that has all three color channels and they are no longer clipped. So there's blue, there's red, there's green. We would, however, like to get all of those color channels a little bit higher. Just move them up this way a bit. There's two ways to do that using this tool. One is to set the minimum background level. So I can, for instance, if we look at the blue channel, I can slide this, I gotta move this over, bear with me. I can slide this background minimum up and this whole histogram will slide to the right. So if we move that up just a little bit, you can see that it will just slide up. And what it's done is it's added this much to the image. that is one way to do it, and that will work. The other way to do it is to use the HDR pre-scale or pre-stretch scaling. Now, what this is doing, I should have done a slide on this and I didn't. If you can picture an arcsine H curve, so sort of think of it as a half of a parabola going up. This controls the curve that you're using to stretch. This slides the data up and down the curve. So if we select nth power, as opposed to nth root, nth power, then we can take this black point, and if you slide that up very little bit, it will compress the black stuff a little bit. Now watch what happens to the blue. See, it got compressed? Okay, so if I undo that, you see how this is stretched quite a bit. If I do this and I slide it up just a little bit, this will compress. There, see the effect?
Blair, do they all compress?
Yes, they do. Remember, I'm only showing the blue here, but they all do the same thing.
Thank you.
As long as you have all three colors selected here. What this does, anything I do operates on all three color channels.
Oh, so if you select, yeah, okay,
If I select red, it only operates on the red channel.
okay.
There are a couple of exceptions to that, and the tools that have exceptions have a little drop-down list box that allows you to select the color you want to do it to. So now we've moved this well up off this edge, which is what we want to do. And you can see you have an image it's a little washed out, let's face it, but it's there. A couple more tools or things to take a look at in this dialogue now. We've moved the black point up. We can brighten the whole image by doing this. You move the white point up higher. You can see the whole thing got brighter, right? Move that back, around there. We can take this histogram now, and we've compressed it by moving, I'll move this over here, by moving the black point up a little bit. We can then take the whole thing and slide it down and make it darker by sliding this exponent over. So if you watch what happens, the contrast will actually come up a little bit. You notice that?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that's generally how you can do it. You will notice that there were several other functions here for the pre-stretch. One is linear and one is root X instead of power X. The difference in root X, when you select root, this is no longer exponent, it's root. And as I slide this over this way, instead of making the image darker, it makes the dark stuff lighter. So basically two different ways of getting the same effect, really. So it is useful, however, to use root when you're doing things like globular clusters. You can set the stretch and everything else for the core of the globular and then slide the root slider over to get the faint outer stars and background in the globular. However, we won't do that tonight because we're not doing a globular, we're doing a nebula. So again, you just sort of slide this along until you get an image that has some contrast to it, but you do not want to take the sky down to black. That's an error that a lot of people make at the beginning. You want to leave the background actually a little bit light. So we're going to go probably about there. Now you can see you've lost some contrast. The background is a little lighter, but there's a reason for doing that. Bear with me a second. Admit. Someone just joined us. That's probably Ali, I think. Oh, okay. Hi, Ali.
Hello.
It looks like you came in with my ID, but that's okay. I don't quite know how that happened. At any rate, so what we're taking a look at here is a package called ImagesPlus, and it's the package that I use for image processing. So we'll move along here. This session, Jerry, I believe, is being recorded.
It is, yeah.
So everything that we've done to this point, you'll be able to see in the video off the website later. So now the one other thing you'll notice in this image is, although it looks kind of nice at this contrast level, there's actually a little too much saturation in this area. And as we end up dialing up the contrast, that's going to look really crappy. Now, just to give you an idea of what I mean, I'm going to just, sorry, go ahead. Okay, I'm just going to arbitrarily dial up the contrast and let's see what happens here. See what happens? It's look kind of messy. Ali, if you wouldn't mind muting your microphone. Oh, looks like you did there. Good. So you can see what happens now. The color looks really deep red there, and it's kind of not quite what we would like in the end. So one other thing in the ArcSine H stretch function in ImagesPlus, as soon as I undo the brightness and contrast here, there we go. Okay, is we can decompress colors here. Now, normally, as you stretch things, the more you stretch it, the more the color fades to gray. The saturation goes away. And generally what you do is you use these sliders to recover the saturation. So for instance, with red, if I had taken color out of the image, I would slide this up this way to get more red. Problem here is I have too much. So I'm going to slide it the other way. I don't have to go very far to get the effect I want.
How is it that you know that is too much?
I've processed lots of images. Experience is the best answer to that. There's a very precise answer to that because I've already done this image several times and I know that that's too much. I've worked through the processing in this several times already. But generally, Jerry, the answer to your question is if the saturation, once this comes back here, if the saturation actually looks good in this initial stretch, knowing that you're going to increase the contrast further and knowing that that is going to make the saturation even higher, that will tell you as a guide that even if that looked perfect right now, chances are it will be too much when I do the rest of the processing.
What does the red histogram look like right now?
There you go. You will barely see the change in the red histogram when I do this. So I'm going to turn the saturation down a little bit and watch the red histogram.
Wouldn't you create noise if
Nope.
you stretch your data?
Nope.
But wouldn't you amplify already existing noise?
Yes, you would, but you'd amplify the signal as well. So the signal to noise ratio. Now, there's a catch to what I'm saying here. If I were using a linear stretch, I would not change the signal to noise ratio. I'm not using a linear stretch, so I do make it a little bit worse, but not a lot. As you can see, it's not a particularly noisy image. A linear,
I mean, there's some grain around the nebula.
absolutely there is, and we'll take the rest of that down. There's actually quite a bit, so if I zoom in on this, all right, now you can see, if I get down to this area, you can see some noise in here, and we'll work.
Still cleaner than anything I ever took.
You have to remember that this is several hours worth of data, not several seconds.
Oh yeah. Yeah, mine's usually just a few minutes.
Yeah, so this is a couple of hours worth of data here. So now you can see we've got an image that it looks pretty good, other than the fact that the contrast is not great yet. You'll notice a couple of things that I've done in this image. I haven't overstretched it. Now what I mean by that is if I take this power slider and I take it all the way down here, the image gets brighter, but you'll notice the stars get really bright. Some of them actually saturate to the point where this star is now white, so is this star and these stars. You want to avoid that. You want to avoid making your stars bloom.
I have a way to counter that.
Sorry?
I have a way to counter that in Photoshop.
Yeah, there are several to do it. One of them.
There are star masks, and there's also just setting your black and white point every time you do a stretch.
The black and white point setting that won't help if your stretch clips the white point. All you can do is turn the clip data down. You'd still lose the color. So ImagesPlus, however, has these controls to let me adjust the color, which we've done. We've turned the red down a little bit. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit more here. And once that finishes, that looks pretty good. That might even still be a little too much, Jerry, but we'll see here in a minute. So now the next thing we're going to try and do, as Ali pointed out, there is some noise in this image, and we want to up the contrast and detail quite a bit, but we don't want to do it at the expense of making the stars bloom. And we don't want to do noise reduction that blurs the stars and leaves a halo around them. So ImagesPlus has another tool that is absolutely incredible for doing this kind of stuff. So the keys to take away from using the arcsine stretch are make sure that the color is reasonable, but not too saturated, and make sure that you do not make the background too dark. You want to leave it a little on the bright side. So that's sort of our initial stretch right there. Now at that point, the initial stretching is done. So in order now to take some of the noise out, but not blur the stars, it would be nice to be able to do noise reduction and not apply it to the stars. Now there is a way using masks in Photoshop. It's a little limited, but it does work. I can make a mask of this image, make an inverse of the mask, and that will save most of the stars, but it will still screw up the star halos a little bit. ImagesPlus does a nice tool for doing this kind of processing, and it's under mask tools. And why Mike put it there, I don't know. Actually, that's not true. I do know why he put it there. But it doesn't really fit with the name. You notice the name says feature mask. And ImagesPlus is the only tool or the only package that I know of that has a tool that does this and does it this easily. There are other tools that will let you do this. StarNet++ is one that comes to mind. But ImagesPlus feature mask will allow me to separate the stars and the background image. And I get a whole lot more control over it than I get with something like StarNet++. It is excellent for removing stars. In some cases, it's not quite as good as StarNet++, and I have both tools and use them frequently, and I'll pop back and forth between them to see which one does the best job. But one of the nice things about using the feature mask is I can do it several times during the processing of an image with no problem at all. I can just split the stars out, do something to the nebula or to the stars, and then put them back together and continue on. So the way this works, now, some of you will be familiar with the process of correlation, some of you won't. But what ImagesPlus does is it runs a correlation routine to find where all the stars are in the image, but it has to know some things about the stars. It has to know a rough idea of the star radius. So the bigger you make this, the more stars or the bigger stars will be removed. So for instance, if we just tell it to go now with all the default settings, it'll get most of the stars, but it'll leave some of the halos. So we'll just let it crunch for a minute. By the way, for those that are wondering about it, you'll notice that this changes to a yellow background on the window. That means it's doing something in that window. It will go back to blue once it's finished here, so bear with me a sec. Okay, so now you can see it's removed some of, but not all of the stars. And it didn't remove some of the stellar halos. See there? So what we're going to do, we're going to slide the star radius up. And the idea is to slide it up far enough so that it removes almost all of the halos, but does not remove clumps in the nebula. If you slide it too far, it's going to mistake some of the clumps for stars. That's what this threshold allows you to do. I can slide this further, to the right, and ImagesPlus will then know that it's got to be a closer match to a star before it will take it out.
To remove star halos, you can sometimes drizzle your image, and that will help star halos.
Drizzle won't
Make it
help star
smaller.
halos at all. Drizzle is a method of combining images to get additional resolution and a
Yes,
oversample.
but it's a AI in a way, and it usually makes the star halos smaller and brighter.
Smaller and brighter is not getting rid of them. It's just bloating the star.
But you can bring it down.
You can bring it down in anything. You don't have to drizzle to do it though.
I'm sorry if I'm not going to be paying attention. I'm listening to this while polar lining my telescope. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Now, one of the things in here that you'll notice in these images, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. You see all these little faint stars, these faint red stars? There's a reason it did not remove those, and the reason has to do with the color mode. What this is doing is it's only looking for stars that show up in the red, green, and blue channels. If I select this, it will now look for stars that show up in any single color channel. These red stars that you see here don't show up in the other two color channels, and that's why they weren't removed. However, if you do that, chances are it will remove some of the nebula as well. So if we tell that to run again, you'll see that it will remove almost all of the stars, but you notice that there are a few little bits of noise and nebulosity that it removed. So you slide the threshold up a bit to fix that problem.
Blair, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm processing, like I'm trying to follow this doing with the M31.
Yep.
Now creating this mask, I see where it's blocking out the stars and stuff like that, but am I trying to prevent it because if I go too far, it almost looks like it puts a black ring around the core. That
Yes.
bright core.
Yeah,
M31.
you don't want.
So I don't want to go that far.
In actual fact, there's
It's almost like it does the opposite.
Yeah, no, there's another part to this tool, which I'll show you in just a minute, that will fix that for you.
Okay.
So you'll notice now I slid the threshold up and some of those little stars came back, although some of them are still gone. So we're going to sort of slide it back just a little bit. We want to get the best balance we can here. A little bit more. Okay, we'll hold it there for now. We can get it to the point where it will take out virtually all of them, but we don't need to right now.
Blair, can you point to an area that is part of the nebula and not a star that you're trying to avoid including?
Let me see here. 1 second. It's probably right in here would be a good choice. So let's zoom into that area. Somewhat fortunately, Jerry, I picked this image because there aren't a whole lot, but you see this area of the nebula here?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, or this area right here. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take my threshold and I'm going to slide it down quite a bit. Watch what happens in this area along here. See, it took out a lot of the nebula.
Okay.
Bear with me. Even here, you can see it's taking out sections all along here that are actually just bright spots in the nebula.
Okay.
So it will take out parts of the nebula, and you do have to be a little careful. Similar to Fabian's shot where he's looking at a galaxy and it took out the core of the galaxy because it thinks it's a star. You adjust the threshold to minimize that. However, there always comes a point where hi Judy.
Hi there.
There always comes a point where you don't want to slide the threshold up as far as you would have to prevent that. And there's a second part to this tool, which I'm about to show you here now. I'm just trying to get this to do what I want. Okay. Everybody see that little dot right there?
Yeah.
I think that's just a clump on the nebula. I'm not certain, but I think it is. So Fabian, if you take a look, there's another section down here called Special Star Area Processing. Now I click that, and then I click on the image. I'm going to click right on that dot. I'm going to zoom in a bit here. So I'm going to click on this dot right here. And you see I put a circle around that dot. I can vary the size of that circle with this tool. And then I can tell it whether to remove all of the area inside that circle or to keep it. So what you want to do with your galaxy picture, you want to use that section of the tool, click on the core, and then click include, and then slide this along until that circle encompasses the whole core area. Now when I run this or I apply it, it will keep this area right here. It won't make it black. You notice it's not black anymore. And you can either include or remove areas with that tool. It comes in very handy for if there's an area in the image that the automated section of the tool just can't seem to get a handle on, you can select it with that. Now, finally, the next thing we want to do, this is great. We've removed most of the stars, but we want to increase the area that's removed slightly. So you'll notice this mask area size, we're going to increase it by 1 pixel. And we just wait for it to finish. There we go. You can see it just made everything bigger by a pixel. So now let's take a look at the overall image. Most of the stars are gone, but now we want to fill in the area that's missing. So you click this fill radius and click apply. And then after it finishes running, lo and behold, almost all of the stars are gone. We have a few halos left. I could go crazy with selecting each one of those and making them all go away, but for what we're doing tonight, there's no need. So now you see, here's the image of the nebula. Now I want to get my stars as well. So I click split stars, and I will now have 2 images, one of the nebula and one of the stars. There we go. I'm going to shrink that down a bit. There we go. So you should be able to see the stars there. And once it, I'm going to shut down my histogram window for a minute. There we go. One too many. So here's my nebula, here's my stars. So that's what this tool does for me. It allows me to separate the stars out of the image at any time. If I want to make a star mask now, I make a mask out of this image. If I want to make a nebula mask, I make a mask out of this image. However, for what we're doing tonight, we're not going to make those masks. So we're done with the feature mask tool for the moment. By the way, Fabian, when you use this special star area processing section, when you click on the image, if it doesn't line up exactly where you want, you can slide it around with these arrows by any number of pixels per click, or you can just grab it with your right mouse button and drag it to wherever you want it. You can do either of those. So we're going to go back now to the nebula image. I'm just going to shrink the star image. We'll come back to that one a little later when we combine these. So we'll blow this back up to about 20% there, and we'll just start with that. So now, if I zoom in a bit, now you can really see, here's the image. There are still some small stars in the image, and I could have taken those out. There's another section in that feature mask tool called Remove Small Stars. It will take most of them out. It's not perfect, but it will take most of those out. However, for tonight, we'll leave those in. So now you can see, here's the nebula. You can see that the contrast is a little low, and we're going to fix that now. But before we do anything, we're going to fix, or at least attempt to fix, most of the noise. And I'm zooming in on an area so everyone can see the kind of noise I'm talking about here. You see the noise in that area? Hopefully everyone can see that. Jerry, is that coming across on the screen?
A little bit.
Okay, let me zoom in some more here. How's that? Can you see the noise in there now?
Yeah.
Okay. It's minimized because I've left the background quite bright. And by the way, the reason I left the background bright is the same reason you want to have a bright background when you use StarNet++. It's easier for the system to remove the stars. So now what we're going to do, we're going to try and remove some of that noise. There are lots of noise removal tools in ImagesPlus, and I'm going to use a simple one tonight. It is not necessarily the best one, but it is fairly simple and easy to use. So we have standard smoothing and noise reduction right here. And we're going to use the adaptive detail preserving filters, in particular, the selected neighborhood filter. Now, what this tool allows you to do, this is a blurring tool. So you've got box blurs, binomial blurs, Gaussian blurs, median blurs. These preserve detail, but different types of detail, which is why there's 3 different blurs. And this one works the best with nebulae. Anything that varies smoothly in brightness, as nebulas do, there's very little abrupt brightness change in a nebula. This tool works quite well. Now, you normally will apply noise reduction with a mask, but this tool has the ability to select brightnesses in the image and it automatically applies the mask for you. More to the point, if I select a maximum and I say, I only want to blur anything that is, excuse me, I've got hiccups. Let's say this, this brightness or less. I click on the image after I had checked that, and you notice it set the value for me. Now, anything in this brightness range from here down will be blurred. Anything up here will not be blurred. If I had not removed the stars from the image, that will produce very weird halos around the stars. But because there's no stars in the image, that won't happen. We'll also set a little bit of a feather range. This is standard feathering. It'll just blend it together a little better. Now, what we want to do, we want to select, in selected neighborhood, you can only use a kernel up to 51 pixels. We don't need anywhere near that big. We're going to go with, let's say, 15. And we're going to apply a couple of iterations of smoothing to this image. You don't always want to try and smooth everything away in one go because it tends to blur out too much detail. I like to work with smaller filters or more gentle filters and apply them multiple times. So if you take a look, we're going to blur this now, and I want you to pay attention to this area. It's running now. And now look at what it did to the noise. You notice the bright areas here are unaffected. I may have blurred out a little too much in this area. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this slider, we're going to slide it down a little bit. And we're going to reapply the tool. That's a little better. So now you can see this is relatively blurred. We've kept most of the detail, and I'm going to pop back and forth between the filtered and the unfiltered version. So there's filtered. Here is unfiltered coming up as it undoes it all. And you can see there's all sorts of noise in here. And I'm going to put the filtered version back up. And the noise is all gone, but I've kept most of the detail. Look reasonable? That's one pass with the filter, but we really want to do a couple of passes. This looks pretty good. Actually, it doesn't look too bad, but after we up the contrast, and you can check anytime, you just go and pick brightness and contrast, turn up the contrast a bit. And once it does so, you notice you've got some blobs in there that it would be nice to have most of those gone. So we'll just undo that contrast stretch. By the way, ImagesPlus has an infinite redo history. And the way it does that, it saves everything you do on a given image to a file on the disk. So if my computer were to crash right now, I can go in and find the file that is this and pick up where I left off. The downside to that is it makes lots and lots and lots of files as you go, especially if you use any of the paintbrush tools. Every time you click on the image with a paintbrush tool to darken something or lighten it or blur it, it will make a new file. It allows infinite undos, but it can be a little slow. So this is after we've applied the tool once. Now these two buttons, this one in particular, what that does is it locks the adjustment that I just made. If I click apply again, it's just going to do the same thing over again, so it won't make any difference. In other words, it didn't apply this filter to this image, it applied it to the original image. If I click this button, which has the wrong name entirely, it's called set view. It should be called lock action. This locks the image to this state. Now I can apply the filter again to this image. So I'm going to apply it again. Same brightness limitations set, all that sort of stuff. Okay, we'll go with that. I may actually have to do this 3 or 4 more times to get it where we want, but this is close enough for now. So now here's our image. Most of the noise is gone. All of the small stars are still there and the big star halos are still there. So the next thing we're going to want to do is twofold. We want to sharpen the image up a bit. But when we sharpen it, we don't want to make the stars get excessively bright. So we're going to sharpen this image without the stars in it. The other thing we want to do is we want to up the image contrast. Now I can use various contrast tools for doing that, but the one we're going to use does both in one step. And it's called multi-scale decomposition. So now what this is going to do, see if I can describe this. It's going to apply a filter to this image and blur it a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Then it's going to subtract that blurred image, and that's one level of detail. Then it's going to apply the filter again, and it's going to keep doing that to the leftover image. And effectively, it's going to remove more and more and more of the detail. Jerry, if I remember correctly, there is a version of this in PixInsight. It's called the, oh shoot, I forget now. Multi-scale transform or something like that.
Multi-scale linear or median transform. I think there are 2 options.
Yeah, and what it's doing, the linear or median just describes the filter kernel that's used. What it's doing is it's doing exactly what ImagesPlus is doing with this tool. It's just got a different interface. The one thing it doesn't do, I don't think, is one function that we're going to use here tonight, which is create a consolidated detail level. So what it's going to do is I'm going to tell it to use a very big kernel. Now, many of you won't know what I mean by a kernel. It has to do with the way the filtering is actually accomplished. It's a FIR filter. FIR stands for finite impulse response filter. And a filter kernel is a matrix that's applied to this image. And I'm going to convolve the image that you see with this filter kernel. You don't have to worry about the details. ImagesPlus takes care of it, but that'll just give you an idea of, it's basically another image. In this case, it would be 21 by 21 pixels. We're going to go much bigger than that. We're going to go about 200 pixels. The reason we're doing a big filter is we want to get the big areas of this image. We want to include as much of the nebulosity in this detail image as we can. If I only wanted to sharpen up the fine details, I'd use a small window size. And again, you notice this is the number of detail levels. So what this says is there will only be 10 levels of detail subtracted off to come up with the composite or the leftover image. We're going to take that up to about 50 because we want all of the fine detail in the detail image and only the rough brightness left in the what's called the residual image. So now I'm going to tell this to go, and it's going to take it a couple of minutes. And what it's doing is it's doing that math I told you about. It's taking a filter, running it over the image, subtracting that filtered image from the original, and then running the filter again over the result, and just constantly doing that for 50 iterations. And then it's because I left this consolidated detail image checked, rather than making 50 images at different detail levels, it's going to combine them all into one detail image and one residual brightness image. The residual brightness image can be useful for making a mask that is sort of a blur of the nebula, but we're not going to use that tonight. We're just going to use the detailed image here, and you just have to wait for it to do its thing. It's about halfway through now.
There's no automatic convergence setting.
What's that?
I think in the PixInsight tool, you can choose to enable an automatic convergence limit so that it stops if it sees little change in the image.
No, this one will go through only, this one will do exactly the number of iterations that you tell it to do in the detail level Dropbox.
Right.
It doesn't have an automatic stop button, as it were. It does run fairly quickly on a Pentium 4-core i7, so as you can see, it's almost done here now. This takes a little bit longer with my new camera because it's got a few more megapixels to go through. Okay, so now it's doing the last one. And once it's done, you click this button, open all levels, and it's only going to open 2 levels because there are only 2 because I consolidated all 50 detail levels into one detailed image. And we'll just give it a second to open those. This is the overall brightness image. And this really dark image is all of those detail levels added together. So if you take a look, here's the brightness image. And you can see it's sort of a blurry version of this. If I shrink both of these down enough so you can see them both on the screen at the same time. You can see the effect, right? Here's the Gulf of Mexico. That's this area. All the detail that's here is gone. It's in this image. And it's a very blurry overall brightness image. We don't want that. That's called the residual image. So we're just going to get rid of that one. We're going to take this image. Now, what we're going to do, and this is a very nice function in ImagesPlus. I think you can write it in Pixel Math for PixInsight, but I don't know if PixInsight has it directly or not, Jerry. That would be something I would have to check. But I'm going to take these two and I'm going to combine these 2 images into one image, but I'm going to do it using a very specific blend mode. And it's not a blend mode that is in Photoshop. What this blend mode is, once I stop it, okay, I'm going to get rid of the stars because we don't want those. That's this image down here that I shrunk down. Okay, so now I'm going to take these 2 images. Here's my image here. That's the bottom image. The top image, this guy, is my detail image. And I'm going to use what's called a merge split blend mode. Whenever you split things apart in ImagesPlus, it does something to the resultant image. What it does is it adds a small offset so you can actually support negative pixel values. So this will add these 2 images together, but it will never have a negative pixel as a result. So for instance, where this value is darker than this, it will reduce the overall brightness, but it'll never go negative. Where it's brighter than this, it will brighten the overall brightness, but it will never saturate. That last part is not true if there are stars in the image. Stars are so bright that stars will saturate, which is why I took the stars out of this. So now we're going to apply this, and we'll take a look at the result here in a second.
What is the splitting part of the merge split?
Sorry, say that again, Jerry?
The merge split, is there something peculiar about the split portion of that blend mode?
It's just a term that Mike used to say I am merging 2 images that were split by some other function.
Okay. All right. Okay, good.
You got to forgive the guy. He's an image processing guru, but not necessarily a user interface guru. So some of the terms don't make a lot of sense. So now if you take a look, here's the original image we had. Look at the image now. So the detail just pops right out. We've got lots of nebulosity, right? All the dark lanes show up. And you notice the saturation went up. So if I hadn't have reduced the saturation, this would be a god-awful red color right about now. So that gives you an idea of what multi-scale decomposition will do for you in processing, right? We took this, combined it with the original, and we got this. Now, you can, if you want to, apply it with a mask. We can make a mask out of this image. Let's say, for instance, see these bright stars here. We didn't want those to show up. We could make a mask out of this that had those gone, and then it wouldn't apply the brightening to the halos. We're not going to do that tonight, but it's an option that you've always got. You can apply masks to this layer stack here. Just click Add Mask, open up the mask, and click on it. But we'll just do this part for tonight. So here we are here. The PowerPoint that I've uploaded to my website shows doing this same thing with a mask. So it'll show you how to do the mask. So now we've got this, and what we want to do now is put the stars back in. So let's close the original image here, close the detailed image. We don't need that detail level anymore. I could use my file explorer and delete those files, or I can just click delete levels and it'll delete the 2 levels made by this tool. We'll just get rid of them for now. So now we have this image and my stars. So here's my sharpened image, still with a slightly brighter background than I might want, but we're not going to do anything about that until we combine the stars back in. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the stars. And if I really zoom in on these stars, one of the things you'll notice is that the stars can have, if I get to, actually I did pretty good on separating these, the stars don't have an abrupt edge at all. Sometimes they will, and you can fix that with a very slight blur, a Gaussian blur with just 3 pixel window blur size. You'll hardly notice the effect on the stars, but it will smooth out the bottom tailing edge and will blend back in a little better. Now we're going to use that same merge split blend mode to put those 2 images together. And it's got the stack backwards. So I want to take this image, which is this image, has to be on the bottom. The stars, the one you're using merge split for, has to be on the top. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use these 2 buttons and I can change the order. Now the stars are on top, and you'll notice that the star layer automatically gets a merge split blend mode. If you had done a whole bunch of processing and combined that and you lost the merge split blend mode, you can just select it on the list here. Now it's going to create our image here once it's finished. And here we are. So here is our image. We've still got a little bit of a bright background, but look at the detail it pulled out. So we're going to just stop. We're going to do one more thing here. The stars are a little bright, and this effect is very subtle. We're just going to change the opacity of the star layer a little bit, and it'll just ever so slightly dim the stars. You don't want to do it too much or you will tend to make the stars disappear. So you can see now that it's slightly reduced the star brightness. By the way, the selected layer, I don't know if it's visible on the Zoom screen. There's a little arrow right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that's almost a little too much. So let's sort of split the difference here. That's not too bad. So now we'll flatten that stack. We can close both of these down. And the only thing remaining to do to this now is potentially shrink the stars a little bit, although they don't look too bad there right now. We could potentially apply a little more noise reduction, although it's not really needed. And we want to up the contrast a bit. There's lots of ways to up the contrast. Levels usually works pretty good. So we'll just dial the black point up a bit, and there we go. Now we get an image. We can brighten that a little bit if we want by dialing the white point down. You can also adjust just the midpoint, although I generally like to do that with curves. So if we take this and we zoom in on this image, see most of the noise that was in the original stretched image is gone. Now, remember how I said early on that I would normally apply that blur several times and I only did it twice? That results in, you see this slightly lumpy background in here? Is that visible, Jerry, on the screen? If I had done more blurring, that would all go away. But in the interest of time here, I limited it. The other thing you will notice is all of the small stars that are in the image are still in the image. You see them all there. We can do, if we want, one final noise reduction pass here, and we could turn the contrast up a little more, and you got your final image. So for instance, if we want to use, let's use a different noise reduction tool. It's one of my favorites. It's called a frequency filter. And we'll use a low pass filter. But before we do, we have to make a mask. This makes a mask out of the image. We have to invert the mask. And the idea with this is it's only going to apply this blur to the lighter areas of the image. The darker areas of the image won't be blurred as much. Now I'm using levels on this mask to make the dark areas very dark, because we don't want to lose detail in those areas. And then we'll make the bright areas a little whiter. That's not too bad. And we'll just save that as a mask for now. Save. You can give the mask a name if you want, or you can just accept the default. Now we're going to blur this image. First, we're going to blur it without a mask. And what we're looking at when we blur this is we want to take that lumpiness in the dark background down a bit. So we'll start with the default settings on the filter and see what happens. Again, it's actually got an operation in progress. You see the yellow bar. Now it's done. Yeah, we didn't quite take it down enough. We took it down a little bit. So we're going to slide this down this way. It's a low pass filter. So what this white area is, this is the area that's unfiltered, and then it removes more and more of the signal as you get higher in frequency. That's getting a little better. How's that look on your screen, Jerry?
It almost looks more pronounced to me, but they're larger, I guess.
They're larger. All the small ones have gone. That's right. Now we'll take out a little more. And again, we can use multiple passes with this filter. Okay, we'll start there. So we have to apply now the mask. And to do that, we use the history dialog, which you get from the history dialog button here. You click on the mask tool and it brings up this dialog. We're going to come down to mask to mono image rather than a control point mask. And because I saved the mask using the save and copy button, I can copy and paste the mask on that image. And now all my stars come back, but I've still got a nicely blurred area in here, as you can see. So if we do that without the mask, watch the stars. They blur out, as does the detail in the nebula. But if I leave the mask on, there we go. Stars are, for the most part, back. And we got a reasonably nice background. And there we have an image. The only other thing I would do to that, as I said, is maybe we want to up the contrast just a bit. And I generally use curves for that. There's all sorts of ways to do it, but this is as good as any. And then we have to take the bottom part of that curve down a bit. It's maybe a little too much contrast. That's not too bad. So there we have that. Now the final thing I would do to this before the last sharpening is I would take these stars down a little bit. I don't have to go down a lot, but just a little bit. There's a tool for doing that. You don't need a mask to apply it. It's pretty good at finding the stars in the image. Generally accept the defaults on this star size reduction tool. And watch the result here. So now you can see the stars got a little dimmer and smaller. And now we got our image. And we can just finally then set the black point in the image. Oops, need to redo the histogram. There we go. Set. Now on my screen, that actually looks pretty good. I'm not sure how it'll look on a Zoom window, but there is, if I just flip that a bit, rotate counterclockwise. There we go, is the bottom part of the North American Nebula, all processed. And the stars are not big. The reason the stars aren't huge, when we did all that contrast enhancement, there were no stars in the image. So they don't bloat, you don't overly brighten them. The same for all the small stars. They're still there. They didn't get blurred out when we did the bulk of the noise reduction because we did that without stars in the image. It's one of the nice things about ImagesPlus is that the whole package is designed to process sections of an image at a time. So I can actually go in and remove the stars, process just the stars or just the nebula to come up with my final result. Any questions?
That looks amazing.
No questions. I'm going to assume everyone understood every word.
I'm waiting for the replay.
Yeah,
For-
thank God
for
for
the-
recording.
For that, you got to check the video and the PowerPoint on my website.
Yeah.
Now, the only other thing I would, before I would say I was finished with this image, I would probably brighten it ever so slightly and I would fix the color a little bit. By the way, I think people are sending me chats. Do the side by side, original and finished. 1 second. Okay. Great Wall, RASC. And I'll even rotate it so it lines up the same way. There you are, side by side. Original, what we'll call finished for tonight.
No difference at all.
No, I don't see any at all. But you get the idea. Processing is what
Yes.
takes the raw data from your camera that looks like this and turns it into this.
Fantastic.
So the one thing I would do, as I said to this image, I would fix the color up a little bit. Some people like that much contrast in the color. I personally don't. It's strictly a personal choice at that point, but I would remove a little more saturation out of this area personally. The other thing you will notice in this image is it was not stretched so much that all the stars went white. There's still lots of star colors. See, there's red stars, blue stars, you get the idea. Red stars here, white stars, we even got some blue stars over here. So all the star color was kept. And the reason the star color was kept is I didn't do a lot of gross stretching with the stars in the image. Okay, I used a little bit of a stretch at the start to be able to see the data. And then we tended to use other tools other than stretching tools to bring the nebula out to up the contrast. Like I said, you could work further on this. You know, you could tweak, for instance, the color. Easier said than done here. Here we go. I can dial up maybe a little more red. And then dial down the saturation in this area. Let's see here. That's not too bad. You can see it just made a little difference around the really saturated edges. We could take it down maybe just a little bit more. There we go. So that's not too bad there now. We got rid of some of the excessive blue in the image, and we've got a reasonable looking image. You could sharpen it further if you wanted. You could stretch it a little further if you wanted. I wouldn't go nuts with trying to stretch it further, simply because you would start bloating the stars. To give you an example of what I mean, two things will happen as you do that. Let's use levels simply because it's here. Oops. That should, okay. So if we take that and take it to there, and then I'm going to take the white point. So I brightened the image up, but you notice a lot of the color in the stars has gone away. Right, so if we undo that, and there you go. You can see now you've got lots of color back. So you can make it as bright as you want, but you have to keep in mind that when you make it bright, two things happen. The stars will bloat. You see the star got significantly bigger, and a lot of the star color goes away. You also tend to show up all the noise that we haven't removed from the image yet. Again, slide that over there, and there you have the image. If you want it a little brighter in the midtones, you can do that too. Brighten up the midtone a little bit. That's not too bad. So you get the idea. You can play quite a bit and get the, you can sort of fine tune the image from this point to make it look the way you want. Any other questions? We got one coming in here. By the way, don't be afraid to shout them out. It's Mr. Hoskins saying thank you. You're welcome, David. Don't be afraid to shout the questions out. I don't bite, at least I can't, it's virtual.
So how do you end up knowing that that's the way you wanted it? It seems to be, I think inherently I'm going for super saturation and probably a lot more noise in the result.
After you've processed enough images, Jerry, you will develop a feel for it. I'm going to claim that it's not an exact science. That's where the art part comes in knowing how far to push the data. A lot of people will take an image and make it really bright and really saturated, and you hit the nail on the head when you said if you do that, it'll be very noisy. As a result, you need hours and hours and hours and hours of exposure, whereas if you just back off the processing a bit, you can get by with just a few hours.
You cropped before your initial stretch, didn't you?
Sorry, Glenn, can you get a little closer to your mic and say that again?
You cropped before your initial stretch, didn't you?
Did you say, did I crop?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. The image was already cropped before I started.
Yeah.
Fabian is working away on his M31 image there, I'm assuming. How's it going?
You're muted.
I kind of put a stop to it.
What we can do some other night, we can pick an image, and if Fabian will share his M31 data, we can pick that and go through this process again with M31. Do you have access to Dropbox there, Fabian?
I believe so, yeah.
If you want to put your raw stacked image that is completely unprocessed other than stacking it, if you want to put that on a Dropbox and just pop a link up in the chat, I can download it and we can quickly take a look at it.
Yeah, that's 1 second around.
Okay, I'll close this one. And bear with me just a sec, folks. While he's doing that, I'm going to take a very quick bio break. Had a cup of coffee right before the meeting. I probably shouldn't have done that. I'll be right back.
Wrong kind of liquid, Jerry. Too much caffeine.
I don't think the day would start without caffeine.
Well, it's not the day then.
Yes, there's a limit. No coffee after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that looked pretty good. I just know that it will be very hard to duplicate that. It all seems so easy when he does it.
Well, that's why it's good to have the recording. I've been following the earlier ones and running them backwards and following them again, but it getting reasonable results all of a sudden. So I'm much more comfortable now than I was the last 3 sessions.
Good.
I certainly don't understand the magic behind it, but I think the idea of just playing with it to see what happens is a good way to learn it. Too many options.
There
Can you
we go.
imagine what driving would be like if you had as many control points as you do with this software?
Wouldn't it be fun?
Some people would call it fun. Terror is another word that comes to mind.
Were you able to upload that image, Fabian?
Try that.
Let's see here.
Here now, maybe.
Well, I've got a link. So let me see if I can use that link to download the data. That's interesting. Why didn't that let me copy that?
Have to download it, Blair.
I did, or I shouldn't say that. What I meant was, why didn't it let me copy the link?
Oh, the link. Oh, that's different.
Maybe I just have to click on it and not copy it. We'll see here in a minute. There we go. That got it. I don't know why I didn't do that the first time. Download it. Direct download. You have to love Microsoft. I have 0 seconds left. It's still downloading. There we go. Okay. That was Microsoft seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I've got it. Let's see. We just move it to a folder here. Once my computer catches up with me, I'll stick it in the infamous new folder on my desktop. Okay, let's see if I can open it here. Okay, can you see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay, desktop, new folder. Okay, so there is your M31 image. Doesn't look too bad, actually. So first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to stretch that a bit.
M31, that's Andromeda, right?
That is Andromeda, that's correct.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just stretch the image a bit. Okay, now that is really clipped. What I mean is I've got the color channels clipped, so bear with me. I'm going to, here we are, shrink that and move it over here. So now let's take a look at the histogram. Now, did you
Just
crop?
curious, what kind of telescope took that image?
That was the Orion ED80.
Fabian, is that image cropped already, or do you still have?
No, this is uncropped.
This is uncropped. Okay, so I'm going to crop it a little bit here in a minute. Let me just find out where all of the stuff that has to be cropped out is. Not much that has to be cropped out, just a little tiny bit around the edges. Okay, so let's just undo that stretch. And we'll crop out a little bit of the image here. And then we'll work with the cropped version. Okay, so here's the, I think I took out the wrong one. Bear with me. No, that was the right one. Okay. So now, it still doesn't quite look right. Let's take a little more of it out. Oh, I know what's wrong. No, there we go. Okay, now we got it cropped. Okay, so here's our cropped image. And here's the histogram of the cropped image. I got to shrink this down a bit so we can see everything all at once. And now we're going to go about stretching that. So we do the same thing. We're going to take the power slider. Let me just reset the stretch here. We take the power slider and slide it over. Don't go too far, like you can go nuts with it. You can take it all the way down here and really brighten things up, but there's not a whole lot of need for it. So you want to go with the minimum stretch that will give you the detail that you want. So there we are there. Now you can see the luminance right now is still, ooh, 1 second. I'm going to check one more thing before I do anything. Is your camera modified by any chance?
Nope.
So you've got lots of light pollution where that was taken.
Possibly.
Is that what's getting
Oh,
the
not overly.
reddish flow or the yellow flow?
It could very well be. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do one more thing that I didn't have to do with my image because my image was taken from really dark skies. I'm going to align the color channels first.
I'm a little border 4 out here.
Okay. So here's red, and red has a peak right there. I want to find the one that's got the lowest peak. Blue, it looks like. Yeah. So we're going to take the color channels and we're going to align all of their peaks. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just holding my thumb where that cursor is, and I'll keep my thumb there and call up the levels tool. And we want to adjust the red peak, which is right here, to line up where that other peak was. We do that just by sliding this over a little bit. Oh, I gotta
You're
select it.
adjusting RGB there, right?
Yeah, and just popped it back. I got to get the red channel. Maybe 550. I'll just key it in. No, more than that. 650. 660. 670. That's got it. Okay, so there's the red channel aligned. Now we need to take, oh, I did the blue channel already, so we need the green channel. We're going to align the green channel. We're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to use levels to adjust it. My guess is maybe 300, 350. There we go. That's even a little too much, 340. Okay. So now the color channels are aligned. So if you take a look, the red channel peaks at the same spot, and the blue channel peaks there, and the green channel is out a little bit, but not much. So now when we stretch it, let's see what we get. We'll just do the same stretch we did. It'll still look kind of reddish, but it'll be easier to pull everything back in here in a minute. We want to go to an 8-bit histogram. And now we want to get rid of clipping the color channels. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to slide the background weight over so that at least the luminance is unclipped. Still got to go a little further. So let's see, green is unclipped, red is still clipped. Still clipped. Okay, and blue should be unclipped. Blue is good. Green is good. Red is off, so we're not clipped anywhere there. Okay. So now, The one thing I don't like about that is you notice it saturated the core, but the core was pretty saturated to begin with, so I'm not sure I could do anything to recover that. So we'll stick with that for now. So there's our initial stretch. The background is still plenty bright. So we can go here. Oops, before I take the background down, we'll slide the black point up a bit just to compress this a little more. There we go. And now we'll slide the background slider down. Okay, so we'll start with that. Now, next thing I would do with this image, Fabian, we're going to start, and we want to correct the color a little bit before we do too much else. That wasn't the button I wanted to hit, sorry. That was the button I wanted. Arc sign. Okay, so read that arc sign stretch with all the same settings, and I'm going to take the red down a bit.
Are you just affecting the red channel on that?
Yeah, I'm turning the saturation down a little bit in the red channel. You'd be hard pressed to see it in the histogram. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do, if there was a star that I knew was white in this image, I can use it to set the color balance. However, generally speaking, the core of Andromeda is usually, when saturated, quite white. So we'll use the color balance tool. Click white balance, and let's see what we get when we click in here. See if it fixes some of the red bias. That made it worse. Okay, we don't want to do that. Undo. So we need that infamous white star. So we're just going to find a star that looks like it should be close to white. We'll take that one. You get a field flattener in that scope?
I do, yeah, but I find on that far top left corner, it kind of skews it a bit. So I don't know. I think my train is kind of.
You've got some tilt in your focuser.
Yeah.
That's what's causing that. Just going over here to have a look. You'll notice on this side of the image, the stars are slightly elongated. And here they're elongated toward the corner.
Yeah.
When you only have that on one side of the image, the usual culprit is a slight tilt. So when you focus your image, you focus it for one part of the image and not for the others. It's not bad, and it's easy to fix that in processing. One thing you will notice is on M32, yeah, M101 is the other one, or M110 is the other one. But on M32 here, you'll notice you've got the dust lanes in there.
Yeah.
So you had focus pretty good. You wouldn't see those at all without having focus nailed. So we get a little bit of the red out of the image, and let's neutralize the background a bit now. Let's say here, part way through. There. I don't like that. It's a little too red, so we'll turn some of the red down. That'll do for now. Okay, so we're going to start with that. And you'll have to forgive me. I got to do this. I can't see M10. I can't see M32 in that orientation. I'm sorry. There we go. So now what we're going to do, the image has been stretched initially. We're going to take the stars out of that image. Feature mask tool. And again, you start with the defaults and just see what it does. Okay, so it hasn't taken all the halos out yet, so we have to expand that. My little dog, my observing buddy, is looking in the window at me here. We can go a little bit more, I think. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Now, you will notice that we've taken the core out of this galaxy, excuse me, and the core out of this galaxy. We'll get those back in just a second. We'll take this and dial it up 1. That's not looking too bad. Okay, so now to get those back, we go to the special star area processing function. We click there. I'm going to zoom in on that. Now you'll notice that's not centered, Fabian.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move it over a pixel. Now it's pretty much centered. Then I can increase the diameter slightly. Ooh, a little too much. I'm just trying to preserve that star. Well, not preserve it. I'm trying to make sure that I preserve the core and have the star go away. I think that's got it. There we go. And then we're going to say include that, so we won't get rid of that. Now when I click apply, that should, the core of that galaxy will come back. Okay. Now we're going to do the same for the other galaxy right here. Now we can just make that bigger. And again, you have to click include. It doesn't remember that you clicked include the last time. And now when it's done, that will come back. There we are. Now we're going to say fill in the stars. And other than the small stars and some star halos, here is Andromeda without any stars. Now we could take those down a little more, but for what we're doing here, there's no real need. So again, we're going to split the, one second, we'll take some of the smaller stars out this time around. This part of the processing is quite slow, so that's why I don't generally use it. That'll take them down a little bit. It won't remove them because I haven't dialed it up high enough, but let's see what it does. Yeah, close enough. Okay, so now we'll split out the stars. And there are the stars from the image. And what we're going to do for now, we're just going to ignore the stars, just shrink them out of the way. And I got to move the video window here just to make sure that I still have the stars. Yeah, they're there. And then we're going to go back and we're going to work on your galaxy. So a couple of things that are wrong with this image right now. The color balance shows a lot of red. There's a bunch of ways to fix that. But let's take care of the noise first. So if we zoom in a bit here to see, you actually have a pretty quiet image there. It's not all that noisy. There's a little bit of noise in the edge of the galaxy out here, but not much. So let's just do a very slight blur. Using the same filter we used last time, except rather than 15, let's try about 7. And we don't want to go any brighter than about here because the galaxy looks pretty good. So we'll say max apply is here. And we'll just feather it a bit so you don't get an abrupt change. And click apply. There we go. That's not too bad. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So we still have lots of detail in here. And we've taken down the noise out in this area a bit. So now the next thing we're going to want to do with this image is fix up the color balance a bit. And it's heavily weighted toward red at the moment. There is a tool that I haven't played with a lot. So let's see what this will do. Ooh, does pretty good. Anyone here use Photoshop a lot with some astronomy plugins? There is a tool called Hasta La Vista Green. This is a very similar tool, but you can use it on any color. So at this point, I'm using it on the red channel, and it's removing some of the red bias in the image, as you can see. And you can remove a whole lot or less. So I'm going to take a little bit more out. That's getting a little closer, wouldn't you say? So now what we want to do is we want to sharpen that image up. Again, you can use a whole variety of different ways to sharpen it. Let's use the same one we used for the nebula. This one we're probably going to need a mask because we don't want to blow out the cores of these guys. So again, we're going to go to multi-scale decomposition. We're going to select a big kernel, and we're going to go, probably could do with 30, but let's try 50 just like we did before. Jerry, are we still taping, or did we stop once the sort of presentation part was over?
We are still recording.
Okay.
That's good.
I'm going to say remove the gap in the middle for the bathroom break before we're done.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, so I was just going back through, I was looking to see how many images I had stacked here. It's about 72 images of about 4 minutes per image.
That's not bad. Yeah, it gave you a nice quiet image. There's a little bit of what looks like a gradient across the image. We'll fix that up here in a minute too. I perhaps should have fixed that before we did the multi-scale decomposition, but we'll see in a minute. What a lot of people don't realize, by the way, is it looks like a gradient, but some of that is not actually a gradient. M31 has a huge stellar envelope, a spherical envelope that goes around it. That's a lot of this sort of bright area that you see. Most people take it out in their processing because they don't like to see it, but it is there, it's real.
Yeah, and I may have only just stacked it with darks. So I had no flats or bias or anything.
This looks more like a gradient. You notice it's bright up here and not over here at the edge.
Yeah.
There is some of the stellar envelope, you can see it around there and up around here, but it's hard to tell whether it's the stellar envelope or maybe just a little vignetting. Either way, we'll fix that up here in a few minutes. Okay, so now it's finished making the images, so we want to open them up. Okay, there's that. Here's the detail layer. And this should be the residual that we don't want. Like I said, we're probably going to have to do this one with a mask, but let's just see what happens. So we'll combine them all. And I'm hitting the escape key to stop it as soon as I saw the images show up here, because I want to take the stars out of it. By the way you remove any image from the stack, you just highlight it and then you press the delete image. It does not delete the image, it just removes it from the image stack. Image is still up here. So now we can click apply, and let's see what our galaxy looks like once it's done. Okay, so now we got lots of detail in there, as you can see. Core's kind of blown out. You got a dust bunny there, another one over there. And the core and that galaxy have sort of blown out quite a bit. So we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that by applying a mask. So we'll make a mask from this guy. And then we'll invert the mask. Do we need to invert it? Yeah, maybe. I don't know whether to invert it or just blur it. So let's remove. by using the custom luminance tool, we'll remove all the real bright parts of that mask. So now, did that get them all? It's got the core of that gone, that's gone, and that's gone. Okay, that's close enough. Maybe just a little, maybe we'll feather that in just a bit. That's pretty good. Now we're going to blur the heck out of that. Okay, let's start with that. Let's see what that'll do for us here. Add mask. So you click on the image you want to add the mask to. You select add mask, and then you click on the mask. And now it's applying that mask to the detailed image. Let's see what we get. We may have to blur this. Oh, it's not too bad. So we got the core of the galaxy back. We've rescued the two cores here as far as we can. Let's see how much detail we have in this outer area compared to the original. We might want to brighten the mask up a bit. Got quite a bit more detail out here, you can see, Fabian.
Yeah.
But we can brighten that up a little bit more. So if we go to here, what we're going to do, we're going to say stretch, use levels for now. And we'll darken the dark area of the mask quite a bit, and then we'll brighten up the bright areas. Maybe a little too much there. Let's just try that, see what that does. That's looking better, but you notice you got a ring around this core now. That's because the mask is not blurred enough there, so we're going to blur the mask a bit more there. And we could do a global blur, but everything else doesn't look too bad. So let's just do we'll blur it with a paintbrush. And normal should work. And we'll pick a fairly large blur radius. And we just sort of blur it more and more to blend it all together. Now, each one of these strokes is leaving a file on my hard drive. They'll all go away when I eventually close this mask, but see what that looks like. That looks a little better. The dark area that was there is now gone. See what I mean? Yeah. Okay. So now let me get operators, local mouse effects, close that so I don't accidentally blur anything I shouldn't. Let's zoom in on this a bit and see what it looks like. See if we brought noise up too much. Doesn't look like. A lot of the stuff you see here that looks like noise, that's actually star clusters in the galaxy. So that doesn't look too bad. And we got detail right into the core areas. That's pretty good. Okay, so we'll flatten that. Now just slide it to the side so I don't close it down by mistake. I have done that on more than one occasion, and you want to hear cursing when you've been processing an image for 2 hours and you close the wrong one. Okay, so now we're looking at original and after we did that combine with a mask. So you can see you've brought out quite a bit more detail in that galaxy. You did, however, make a dust bunny visible right there. You didn't use flats on this one. Now, we could go and probably should just clone out that dust bunny. It's only one, but we won't worry about it for tonight. But that's easy to clone out. So now the next thing we want to do is address this gradient in the image that we talked about. And the tool, there's a bunch of ways to do that. The tool I happen to like is a manual one. It's called multi-point flatten background. And it's got a whole variety of modes, and it is a little counterintuitive. And it really is a tool you just have to practice with, unfortunately. So what's going to happen, we're going to select some points in this image. So this is one. This is another one. We'll select this one and this one. So the first thing we want to do is we want to dim this corner a little bit. The way we're going to do that is we're going to, don't want to add any more points. Each of these points is selected by just clicking on it. You notice this one is now yellow. So whatever I do will now happen to this area of the image. And I'm going to ever so slightly, using this slider, darken this area. It was almost enough. A little bit more. Okay, we're going to lighten this corner up a bit. Drag that point a little, get it more to the corner. And then maybe darken this guy a little bit.
It doesn't look like you're zoomed to the edge of the image. Is that important?
I'm pretty close to the edge, so the answer is no.
Okay.
But if I were further away, the answer would be yes. How's that look there? That looks pretty good. There's a little bit of a light band along here. Were you using an SLR by any chance for that, a DSLR?
Yeah, it's a Canon T2i.
Okay, just for your future information, the light band that you find across either the bottom or the top of your images every now and then, that's a reflection from the mirror box, and there's nothing you can do about it. And a flat will not correct it. You have to take it down in processing. It's a real pain, but it is. Reflection off the corner of the mirror box in your camera. Okay, so now we can, however, with this tool, take that down just a little bit. So we'll put a control point there. And then we'll turn that point down a little bit. Got rid of most of it. So now you have an image that's reasonably flat. It may be a little bright in the center, but not overly so. We could put a few more points around the galaxy and dim them, but it's probably not worth the effort at this point. So we'll say that's now done. Well, this area right here needs a little bit of brightening. So again, we'll click there. Once it's added that point, we'll brighten that up a bit. That looks pretty good. So that's reasonably flat now. So if you take a look, this is what it used to look like. With the gradient, you can see it's brighter here. Now the gradient will go away, but the image is a little redder. We'll fix that in a sec. And we'll just use the reduce RGB thing again on the red channel. Maybe just a little bit more. There, that's pretty good. Now, so there we are there. We can turn the brightness up on this a bit, but generally you don't want to until you add the stars back in. So let's take a look at the stars here and see how they look. Okay, now you can see this star has a little bit of an abrupt edge. You notice the very quick transition from the blue color to that red halo?
Yeah.
We'll fix that up a bit with just a very slight blur. That's a little better, at least on my screen. So now what we're going to do, we're going to add those two images together. And again, we'll use the merge split function. And I just got to set the order. This should be merge split. Yep. Okay, now we're starting to get there.
Why does it matter what order they are? Isn't it just combining two pictures into one?
It is combining two pictures into one, but it does it the same way Photoshop does. So if I have this image on top, since there is data in this image right here, and I don't, and you notice this image is set to normal, not merge split, then what would happen is it would just overwrite the bottom layer with the top layer. So I put the stars on top with them set to merge split. If they're set to normal, then you're going to get just an image of the stars because it will overwrite the bottom layer entirely because it has an opacity of 100%. You can see what happened. By changing it to merge split, you'll get the combination of the two. There you go.
Would it make any difference if you had the merge split on the bottom one instead?
I have never tried that. Let's find out. Now, okay, where to go? There it is. Now you can't have it on the bottom one with the top one set to normal because then it would just overwrite it. So now what I've done is here's the galaxy, and I'm going to make the galaxy the top layer with merge split. I've never tried this. I've always had merge split set on the stars. Let's just see what happens. Not great. That sort of overly brightened it quite a bit. I suspect I know the reason that it overly brightened it quite a bit. It's because of the way ImagesPlus started off making those layers. Remember I said it adds a little bit to overcome negative pixels to the star layer. Merge split. Go. There we go. So now here's where we're starting from. So now we'll flatten that. So now in this image, you have the galaxy with lots of detail. You have lots of stars, and the stars have not gotten really big and bloated. Plus you have all the star color. But the background is a little bright, so let's take that down. How's that starting to look? It's not too bad. And we'll brighten up.
So you never bring that black point right down to the edge, eh?
Never.
Data? No?
If you do, you'll lose all this faint stuff out here.
Okay.
So for instance, watch. See how a lot of the faint stuff out here and up here went away?
Yeah.
It's a personal choice how far down you take it, but never take it right to the edge, and certainly never cut in like so.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Because now you can see it's all gone.
Yeah, those two.
Right. The other thing you have to watch out for is I'm only looking at the luminance here. So before I would be happy with this, I would want to say let's look at all the color channels. So here's red. Red is clipped. So I've gone too far. I clipped red. Green is okay. Blue is okay. But red is definitely clipped, and
But
it's shifted down a bit.
Yeah, you brought the red down earlier though, didn't you not?
Yeah, so we'll fix that up later, but I'll unclip it now. I just have to go far enough that I don't clip red. There we go. Maybe just a little touch more. There we go. So there's red. Here's blue. Here's green. So now, ideally, we would like to line them all up again. We might be able to use the color tool here. This might work. I've never tried this. Let's see what happens. White balance. I don't think it's going to work, and that's going to make it too red. Oh, no, it's not too bad. Blue is still a little high, and green is a little high, but I do like the color balance I came up with. So now we're starting to see lots of galaxy. Background is looking a little more reasonable. And I don't think any of the color channels are clipped. There we go. So now the only thing is the image contrast is a little bit low. So what we would want to do now is perhaps line the color channels up. Then we could bump up the contrast a bit. So let's just see what that'll do here. Before I do though, I want to check the noise. Still looking pretty quiet. I don't see a lot of noise in that image. You can see all the detail we've got. You can even resolve individual big blue giants in that huge star cluster. It has its own NGC number. I forget what it is offhand. And you've got the dust lanes in this guy. And the stars are nice and small and tight. They didn't bloat. Right? That's the nice part about using this process to stretch an image. You don't bloat the stars. Okay, let's close that down for now. Now what we can do is let's take a look at a curve adjustment to see if we can't brighten up some of the galaxy. Maybe went a little too far with that. One sec. It's not doing quite what I want. So let's try that kind of a curve, and then we'll adjust the black slider. Yeah, I'm not liking that effect. One sec. Use one of the general stretch functions here just to sort of set the final result. Arcsine H. Now this Arcsine H stretch you don't use for your original Arcsine H. You get that one from here. I don't know why there's a difference, but there is.
Is it doing the same thing, or is it is there something fundamentally different about it?
Sorry, I can't hear you, Glenn. You're all muffled.
Sorry, you said, is it doing the same thing but isolating it to a section of the histogram?
Not sure why Mike has a different Arcsine H stretch function for use after you do an initial stretch. I really don't know why he did that, but they do work differently. So there we go. We're starting to get there now. There we go. How's that looking, Fabian?
Pretty good.
Got to fix the dust bunny that's there.
Yeah.
But you
That's
can-
been there a while.
Yeah, you can even see the outer halo I was talking about now. You see it sort of arcing around there a bit.
Yeah.
It looks, however, a little green, so I probably want to fix that up a bit. Let me see. Let's try there. That will make it too red. I made it a little too red, didn't I? Okay, let's apply that with a mask. Undo. Okay, we're only going to take the green down in the areas that are dark. We'll make a mask. We'll take the negative of the mask, and then we'll use levels to darken everything. That's pretty good. And then we want to lighten up the background a bit. A little bit more. And then maybe the midtones too. Okay, let's try that. See what that'll do. There are more complicated masking functions that we can use to get what we want here, but this should hopefully do the trick. So now color balance, neutralize background. And then apply that with a mask. There we go, that fixed up most of the green out here. Not all of it, but most of it. And then, but the only thing I would do, you didn't use flats on this, so you can see a little vignetting in that image.
Yeah.
You can fix vignetting a couple of different ways. Perhaps the easiest way to fix it here is with a curve adjustment and something called a control point mask. And I'm not going to get into too much on how to generate different kinds of masks here tonight, but we've been using images as masks. You can use what's called a control point mask. And what we're going to do here, we're going to, once it changes, there we go, 4 corners. So what we're going to do, we're going to brighten up the corners. Don't know that I'm going to be able to get that bright enough. Can I make this dimmer? Nope, I have to, oops, go to the curve. I'm not sure that did much. I'd have to play a bit to figure out how to get that vignetting out of there. Let's try. Multi-point flatten. Don't worry about what it did to the color. That we can fix. And then what we want to do is we want to brighten up this corner. It's not going to get it all out, unfortunately, I don't think. And we want to put a point here. Turn that point down a bit. No, that's just going to make it worse. Okay, we won't do that. What I would have to do to fix that is I would have to, once it finishes, there we go. Let me just close all these other images down here. There we go. In order to fix that, I'd have to make a proper control point mask that only affects this area, and then use a curve adjustment. Curves usually work best because I can tailor them a little better. So if we do that, and if I can get the control point mask that I want, mask, where's reset? Reset mask. So what I'm doing here, I'm making a mask that only affects the outside edges of the image. At least that's my plan. I just want to get the corners here. Okay, now you can see that it's lightened it up a little too much over here. This isn't too bad. So what we want to do here is take this and turn it down a little bit. And probably the same here. And then just a little bit here in the middle. Okay, so there, that's not too bad. Let's see how that looks if I see the difference? Still a little out right here. So we want to take that up just a little bit. Maybe a little too much. Can everyone see what I'm pointing at here? This little black line right there. That's because I don't have this area quite right. We have to play around a little bit to try and blend that together. That looks pretty good. So that's got this side fixed. Now we want to fix right there is a little dark. Oop, not that much. Okay, that'll do for now. How's that look? Reasonably flat? Most of the vignetting is fixed, maybe just a little too much of an effect in that corner. There you go. So there, most of the vignetting is now fixed in that image. And about the only other thing to do now would be to take down possibly some color noise. If you get in here, you see this color modeling that's in there? You can take that down several different ways. One of the, sorry?
That is noise.
Again, Glenn, whatever it is with your microphone, it sounds like you're talking through marbles.
That I just said, commented, that is noise. It's not, it can be removed.
Yeah, you can see it better here. You see there's red blotches, green blotches, that sort of thing. That's when I zoom right in. So probably the best way to take that down is to use a mask. so we don't kill the stars and everything.
Now, I shot at ISO 1600 for that. Now, can I reduce the noise if I went with 4 minutes at around 800?
It's not going to reduce it by much, if at all. You'd have to take a look at the noise curve for your camera.
Yeah.
There is a website called Photons to Photos, I believe. And you want to look at the input referred noise curves. And they list them for a lot of different cameras. And that will tell you what you want or where you want your ISO to be.
Okay.
Generally, anywhere between 800 and 600 or 1600 is usually fine. Some cameras want slightly more, some slightly less, but you're probably close to the happy point there now. Okay, so now we're going to do this. Use the mask we're going to use. Save that mask. And we're just going to blur the heck out of the background. At least that's the plan. Use a frequency filter tool again. Once it finishes, we can go a little further. It's not looking too bad, so now we'll put the mask on it. That looks like it's fixed most of it. It's not too much left there, a little bit maybe. And we'll just use a different blur to help take down the last of it here. We don't need anything very bright here. That looks a little better. Now let's put the mask on again. Save those stars, hopefully. And change the blend mode. There is color. A color blend mode here somewhere. Color. Nah, that one really didn't help much. Okay, let's just undo that one. I'd have to, here's where you'd use the feature mask tool again, take the stars out, and then I can blur it more. So here's the image. We still got that little bit of color modeling. Let's take the stars out. We don't have to be too precise this time around, which is good. There we go. And then we'll fill it in. We'll move that video window out of the way. Split the stars. Then what we're going to do is to blur that background some more. But now we need to make a new mask. Because now we need a mask without the stars in there. Let's start with that. That's probably about as good as we're going to get. You're still going to have a few slight color lumps there. You can just barely see them. Let's put the mask back on there. It's not looking too bad. So let's pull the stars back in. Oh, they were in the right order that time. And then other than setting the final black point, we're almost there. We might want to do that with levels, or not levels, with curves, so we don't clip anything. Oop. It's telling me I have to flatten the stack first. Now there's one neat trick you can do here that uses a mask again, and I just want to get the value right before I try it. Okay, so that's actually not too bad right there. We can take some of the brightness down a little bit more in the dim area. That's not too bad. We could take a mask that highlights just the background. And the way you do that is you make a luminance mask again, and you invert it. We want to leave most of the galaxy untouched. So the way we do that is we make our mask dark. A little bit more here. So now what's going to happen, hopefully, if I did this right, is only the bright areas of the image of this mask will be darkened by the curve. So it will leave most of the galaxy untouched. At least that's the plan. Let's see what happens. There we go. So now I can actually turn it down a bit more. And we won't dim the galaxy as much. There, how's that look, Fabian?
It's pretty good.
And again, you can see, even though we've done all that, the stars haven't bloated too much. I would probably do one final star shrink here, and then you'd have your image pretty much done. So if we went to there and there, there we go. So there is your M31. You could do a little selective sharpening if you wanted to sort of really make the dust lanes pop.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
Reasonably straightforward to do. Close a few windows here. Again, it is something I would do without the stars in the image, because the stars will bloat.
Yeah.
They'll get really bright. And again, with ImagesPlus, at any time you want to get rid of the stars, you just pull up the feature mask, make the stars go away. We don't have to get them all out here just because we're doing this kind of quick, but maybe 2 for now. That might be a little too much. There we go. And then That seems to have done a good job at removing the stars because I'm going to paint a mask around these dust lanes here. Split the stars out. Then what we're going to do, we're going to make a mask that highlights just these dark dust lanes here that we want to sharpen up a bit. And the way you do that is you make a luminance mask. Now what we're going to do, we're going to reduce the brightness of this luminance mask just a little bit, and I'll show you why here in a second. This is a trick I figured out for being able to paint on masks. So now, because I reduced the overall image brightness, there's nothing in this image that's fully saturated, 65,536 for a pixel value. Even in the core here, if you look down here, or even in what looks like a bright saturated core, it's only 63,000. So now what we're going to make a paintbrush. And I'm going to fill with something that's maximum white, 65536. It's just 2 to the 16th for anyone that's wondering where that number comes from. And I want to set the size of the paintbrush to sort of fit the dust lane. Close enough. And then what we're going to do, we're going to take that and we're just going to paint white along the dust lane. And as you can see, I can't paint worth beans. But fortunately, you don't have to be particularly precise. Well, there's not much detail there. We'll try that anyway, just to see what happens. And then I should shrink the size of this brush down a bit. Ooh, a little too far. This is one thing I like about ImagesPlus over PixInsight is it is much easier to paint things in ImagesPlus. You can do it in PixInsight, but it's a little bit of a pain. There's more dust lane there, there, and there. Now what we're going to do, we're now going to threshold that mask. And what I'm doing is anything below where my cursor is going to be black. Boom. Now we only have the areas that I painted. We'll blur that quite a bit. A little more than that. And maybe a couple of passes. The blurring will blend the effect into the areas that are sharpened and not sharpened. That's why this gets blurred. Okay, let's start with that. I may want to blur that a little more yet, but we'll soon see. And then we're going to go back to this and we're going to sharpen it up. There's a lot of different ways to sharpen it. I could use a frequency filter. I could use deconvolution, but let's just try straight sharpening with a wavelet. That got a little better. The effect here is somewhat subtle, especially on a zoom window, but you'll be able to see it here in just a minute. Now we'll apply the mask to that because we don't want to sharpen everything. We just want to sharpen the dust lanes. Now let's see, we should be able to see the effect. If I do this, yeah, so let me zoom in here. Hopefully this will be visible. So here is unsharpened. It's still pretty.
Is that the right mask, Blair? It looked different.
No, it's not. You are correct. I thought I saved the mask, but maybe I didn't. I guess I didn't save the mask. That would do it. So let's put that mask in there. There we go. Good catch. So here is the sharpened dust lanes. There are the unsharpened dust lanes. Can you see the difference in the zoom window?
Yeah, it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And another way to get really nice dust lanes in a galaxy is to, one sec, we'll undo that. Wait till this finishes. Okay, another way to get really slick dust lanes is to use multi-scale decomposition again, but we're going to use a small window size and a small detail level. This will just sharpen the fine detail. Also run a whole lot faster. Once it finishes here. Then we'll open up all the layers. Okay, now, this is now the residual layer. We don't want that one. This is now the detail layer. Now, I don't know, can you make out that on the zoom window?
Yeah, you can see it a little bit there.
Just, it's very dark, but it's only the really sharp detail that's there. So what we're going to do now is combine images. And unfortunately, I have several images open here right now, so I have to go hunting for them. So let's just get the ones we want. There's the consolidated detail. We do not want the mask layer as an image in there, and we don't want the stars. But what we now want to do, we want to put the mask on this layer. So we click on that. We say add mask, and then if you just go up to open images, you can find the mask. There it is right there. It has the word mask on it. Grab that mask, and let's see what that does to the dust lanes. I may have to blur it a little more. So now look at the dust lanes. So you got that compared to, I put them at the same zoom range, 25%. Whoops. So now can you see the difference there?
Yeah, big that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So that brought the dust lanes up quite a bit. So we'll go with that one for now. So we'll flatten that. We'll close that down. We'll close the mask down. We'll close the detail level down. And now we just have this and the stars. Layers. You don't have to close all those dialogues, but you get lost in them after a while, so I tend to make them go away. Now we'll combine those two. You watch it pick the wrong one to go on top. Yep. This should be merge split, which it is. This will put the stars back in. How's that looking?
Good.
Like I said, you do have a dust bunny right there that you want to clone out. But other than that, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I've been having trouble with that dust bunny for a while now. Become my friend.
That dust bunny,
Is on my camera somewhere.
I don't know if it is. Do you have you said you have a flattener in there, didn't you?
I do, yeah.
Might be on the flattener. Generally, if a dust bunny is right on your sensor, it will be in sharp focus. It'll just be a black dot.
Well, okay.
But it unlikely it'll ever be right on your sensor because you have an anti-alias filter in front of it. So if it's on the anti-alias filter, it's a little bigger black dot. that looks kind of big. That might actually be on one of the lenses of your field flattener. Basically, the further away from the sensor you get, the bigger the further out of focus the dust bunny is.
Okay.
Or maybe it could be a smudge, oil smudge or something on the sensor.
It's possible, but I doubt it. That looks it's round. Chances are that's a dust bunny, probably on your corrector, your field flattener. That would be my guess. So it might be worth giving your corrector a cleaning. The other thing that happens, and it happens to me all the time, is, and Jerry, I suspect you'll see it every now and then too, as the night progresses, you'll get what looks like a really big dust bunny. And it's basically a little bit of frost buildup on the flattener. I actually wrap a dew heater around mine.
What, around the flattener?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
In the winter. I don't worry about it in the summer.
Yeah.
So again, there we go. There's M31 with reasonably sharp dust lanes. You could sharpen up more just by changing that mask. And we can, then sort of set the final brightness and wrong one. The final background level with microcurves adjustment again. That's not too bad. How's that look?
Good.
And like I said, the nice part about using the split star processing, you don't screw the stars up while you noise reduce or while you sharpen or anything like that, because they're not there. And you don't have to go nuts making masks to get rid of them. Now, the only other thing I would do to this image is if you zoom in, and this might get a little tricky. Actually, the last star reduction that we did sort of fixed that upper corner. You notice the stars don't look too bad there now.
Yeah.
There is a
I think it was
tool.
on the lower corner. You flipped the image though, didn't you? Would it be down?
Oh,
in the
you're
lower
right.
corner?
You are right. I flipped the image. Yeah. Okay. So you can see you got a little bit of elongated stars here. Here's a neat trick. Under the star halo correction, you do not want to change the size of the stars, but what you want to do, you want to get those a little more circular. Now, I can never remember which this is. I think this is a right diagonal, but if I got it wrong, it'll be immediately obvious. I think I got it wrong. I think that's a left diagonal. Yep. Okay, now you notice the stars out here are getting rounder?
Yeah.
Okay, but it'll screw the stars up elsewhere in the image. So what you want to do is use a control point mask for that. And what we want to do is corners plus. And we only want one corner. Bottom right corner. Oh, it doesn't give me that as a choice. It means I got to do it manually. Okay. Flat. So we'll make everything else black. Except for that bottom corner. Whoops. As it finishes there. I did that wrong. Where did the dot go? There it is.
Off to the right.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. The video window from Zoom was over it. We'll have to play a bit here to get the adjustment just right, but bear with me. So that's not looking too bad. So now if we go to the history window and we undo that correction, See what happens to that star. We could even do more of that correction, I think. Yeah, let's do it a little more. Why didn't I see a lot of change there? Maybe I have
I
to.
didn't say much.
One sec, don't use a mask. Let's make sure I got it right. Yeah, I got it right. Use the mask. Problem is the mask is limiting me to just down there. That's what's going on. Yeah. I don't quite have the mask stretched right. If we go and look at, let me close down a couple of windows here that aren't.
Yeah, because you can see it corrected in the far corner, but
Yeah. Yeah, so all that means is we have to do a little adjustment of the mask here.
Yeah.
So now it's down to about there. What I'm trying to do is I want to limit it so I don't affect this galaxy.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've got too much correction dialed in, which I'll fix in a minute. Okay, so now I'll take this and dial it down to about there. That's not too bad. So you can see we haven't touched this area, but this corner is almost completely fixed.
Yeah.
Right, and you can do that in Photoshop, but it's a pain in the butt. There's a way of you make a layer, use a darken combine, and you slide the layer along with a mask, and it'll do the same adjustment. But ImagesPlus, and I think there's an equivalent to this in PixInsight, isn't there, Jerry? That'll let you fix stars.
There is an option. I'm not sure if it's quite like this, but there's something, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, we can move this mask back a little bit more just by doing that. What I'm trying to do, I'm pointing with my finger, which does no good. Sorry. We don't want to affect the galaxy here. So that's the limiting case here. Okay, I'm starting to get up to the edge of the galaxy there now, but that's not bad. So there we go. We've corrected that corner.
Yeah.
If there were another corner that needed correcting, we could adjust it as well. So now we take a look at that image. There we go. We now have corrected stars in this corner. Decent looking galaxy. You could potentially up the saturation a bit. And you could make the core a little redder if you want it. That's pretty straightforward to do in any package. You literally make a mask to highlight just the core, and you come along to this tool and you can dial in some red, and you can make that core a little bit redder.
That'd be the same with the, you can do that with the blues, I guess, with the.
You can do that with any of
clusters.
these colors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do that very selectively by adding a mask around there.
Cool.
You know, give you an idea here. If we say, okay, I want to make a mask. And again, we're going to just do this area. So what we do is we do a little bit of a brightness contrast stretch, and we turn the brightness down so that we know nothing will be at maximum brightness. And then we can just paint a mask in the area we want to affect. And we can say, okay, I just want to make this area in here a little bit redder. Say to about there. And then fill it in. I came down a little too far here, so we'll just flip this to 0 and paint that out. And then we'll just threshold it again, and we will have, oops, we will have just the core as the mask. There we go. And then we blur the heck out of it. The blurring of the mask on these kinds of adjustments blends the adjustment in quite nicely. A couple of iterations of that blur, I think. Maybe even a little more. That'll do for now. Let's see what that looks like. So now we dial up the red just a little bit. And then we'll put that mask on. There we are. Now you have a red core. It's kind of a yucky color red core, but it's a red core. And you can play around with, you know, the different colors here to get that the red that you want.
Yeah.
You can add a little more yellow if you want. You get the idea.
Yeah.
But you notice it just affects the core where that mask is, and I haven't blurred that mask enough yet. It's not blending in as nicely as I would normally like it. So 1 second here. Generally, you want to make this effect very subtle. So let's blur that mask a whole lot more. That might be better. May even have to go further than that, but we'll soon see. Yeah, that's getting better. So let's see here. We maybe go here. So now you can see, like I said, we'd have to play around a bit to get the color just right, but you get the idea that there it is without the mask, without the red boost. There's a little more red in the core area. Right? And you can play around with the amount of red you add and get the color. You can boost the blues in this outer area should you want to. There's a whole bunch of different ways of doing that. Simplest way. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to make a copy of this image because we're going to make a mask out of the copy. We're going to get rid of the stars. This is a whole lot more complicated than the simple things that we did, but it'll just give you an idea of what you can do.
Maybe after this, given that it's after 10 o'clock, we should
Yeah.
call it a night.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And then under mask tools, there's selective color luminance. What you do is you click to select the color you want. Probably that one.
Yeah.
And maybe a little. That's pretty close. So then what we're going to do, we're going to set the minimum level for the mask. And now you have just basically just that outer spiral arm.
Yep.
Then we'll smooth that quite a bit. And we'll make it brighter. And then we don't really want to affect that little galaxy there, so we'll simply paint that out. And we'll save that mask. Oops, I have to make it a mask first. And we'll save it. And although we used one color tool already, I'll just use another different color tool to show you the different tools that are available. We'll go down to, say, which one? This guy? No, this guy. And what we're going to do is we're going to shift it toward blue. See if I did it the right way. Maybe a little bit more. That's a little bluer. The idea here is to be as subtle as you can. So let's see if that made it a little bit bluer. It did on my screen, but that's probably not enough to show a big change on yours. So let me use a different tool. Let's just undo that one. And we'll go back to this guy. And what we'll do is we'll reset that. Just want to lock that color adjustment in, and we're going to dial up the blue a bit. That looks better. Now you can see the difference.
Yeah.
Right, so if we do this, okay, so look at the blue odor area there. So you can see you've got quite a bit bluer, and you can play with the amount of blue you want to add in, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can get a little carried away fairly easily, but anyway, that's not a bad looking galaxy there at that point.
That's amazing.
Clear as mud.
Got it all, no problem.
And if you take a look, we should have detail almost down into the core.
Yeah, I like the fact that you can still somewhat see that round core.
What's that?
So I still like the fact that you can still see that round core, like it's not blurred out too much. Like
In actual fact, if you took this image and you made your sub-exposures a little shorter, this actually looks like a star.
yeah,
There's spiral arms coming right into there.
yeah, because you can do that. You can combine. You get the two sets of images, combine them.
You can certainly do that. Yeah. Now, the one thing you will notice, all of the sharpening that we did makes, see these little white dots?
Yeah.
They're not real. We might be able to very quickly make those go away using the high pixel adjustment tool. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's just see what it does. It's an iterative tool, so it takes a couple of seconds to run here.
So that would be just a little too much contrast creating that, was it?
Yeah, there's a little bit of noise there, and when we did the sharpening, it emphasized it just a little bit too much. We could use an, there we go, that got rid of most of it there, just doing that.
Yeah, it looks a lot better. Yeah.
Okay. So now if you take a look, here's the galaxy at a fairly big scale. Nice detail in the spiral arms. Lots of color in the outer areas. Not a bad image. I didn't quite fix this corner up completely, as you can see. I overdid it a little there, but other than that, there's your image.
Cool.
So Glenn, you have to do all that to your image too. Glenn has an M31 image that he's got to get posted so people can see it.
Yeah, that's I gotta go back through this video now and go through it.
Like I said, you can.
Yep.
you can
It's the
fig-
mask. It's the mask that's giving me a lot of troubles. It's getting them mask proper.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of practice. There's the mask tools in ImagesPlus are excellent. You can make luminance masks, mask out of each of the channels. You can play around with custom luminance masks, custom color masks. You can make a mask that highlights an area that's basically a blurred area. You can make an edge mask, a mask that just sort of highlights the edges. And you can use the feature mask to get, when you do the original stretch of this image, you can suppress the stars in the stretch by having a mask that has no stars in it. That works quite well, but it's usually not needed if you use the split star technique. You'll notice the bulk of the brightening of the galaxy I didn't do with a stretch. I did it with the multi-scale decomposition combined. That brought up the contrast and sharpened everything quite a bit.
Now that Split Star, that's the same thing as using that StarNet program, right?
It's not, it does the same thing. The catch is it's more convenient to do this way. You can just pop in and do it anytime in your processing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you use StarNet, it'll take it, 15, 20 minutes to run, and it only produces an image that has no stars. You then have to subtract that from your original image to get just the stars.
Okay.
Then you have to add a little bit to it so you never get a negative pixel. Then you have to go process the starless image and then use a lighten combine to put the stars back in. But in ImagesPlus, it's just so easy. You just click a button and you can do it anytime in your process, and you can do it multiple times.
Yeah.
As you saw here on this, we did it like 3 times on this one.
I think the StarNet has an option to make the star mask at the same time.
I think it does. The newer version does, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But the pain in the butt part for me is it runs so slowly compared to this that, you go away and have coffee or lunch and you come back and it's finished.
Yeah, for sure.
It does do an excellent job, though. It removes crowded star fields better than the feature mask tool. But in star fields that are like this, ImagesPlus does a better job. That's why I keep both of them handy. But generally in my processing, even on a crowded star field, I'll use, unless I'm making a mask for stretching an image, I'll use ImagesPlus, take the stars out, do what I want, put the stars back in, and then move on with the processing.
Now the StarNet, I guess, would that be better to work if you were using Photoshop instead of?
My question to you would be, given that ImagesPlus is free, why would you ever use Photoshop?
I have it already, so that's what I initially started with until this one came out and you started showing me this one. So
Yeah,
I'm kind of trying to convert this way.
There is no problem, by the way, using both packages. Use them for what they do well. But I would generally say do everything up to the point you see in front of you in this package. And then if you want to go do some final tweaks in Photoshop, it's got better painting tools. It's got better color tools, a few other things like that. But generally, I mean, I started out the same way. I started out with Paint Shop Pro. And you can do everything, but I'll tell you, it's a royal pain to do it in Photoshop. Just to correct the background color in an image in ImagesPlus is one click. In Photoshop, it's a lot of work. So I would suggest, like I said, since the package is free, download it and learn to use it and use Photoshop for your final tweaks. The nice part about ImagesPlus is most of the tools work the same way that Photoshop does. You have a layers tool. Unfortunately, it doesn't have as nice a display as Photoshop. You don't see individual images in the layers. Yeah. But the layer combine that I was showing you, it works the same way Photoshop does. It has all the same blend modes plus a few more. So and the noise reduction tools are better. I'm not going to say the masking tools are better until you start thinking about making masks out of the feature mask tools. Then it becomes much easier. Star correction is much better, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed with Photoshop too. Like, there's a lot of add-on programs that you have to pay for to, to make it worthwhile,
Exactly.
especially for noise reduction and stuff like that.
Exactly. Now,
Yeah.
there is one other thing that you could do to fix this image background up quite nicely, and you can do it in Photoshop as well. Jerry, I think you can do it in PixInsight, but if you take a look at this level down here, you know, that's, if you look in the far right corner, that's 93032. So the approximate level there is, if I can get the mouse over it again, about 33. If I add in a layer with a light and combine that has a value of 33, it'll completely flatten the background.
Okay.
The catch is it'll look a little unnatural and you have to add a little noise to make it look natural again. But if you do that, you can completely flatten your background there quite nicely.
All right, maybe we should call it a night, do you
I
think?
think that's a plan to call it a night, given that we've eaten up all our time plus some. And we'll have to come up with what to do in the next session, because probably what we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the other tools available in the package and sort of spend some time on each one of them. Most of the time tonight was on the feature mask. Okay, thank you, folks.
Thank you,
Well,
Blair.
thank you, Blair.
Anytime.
This is,
Thanks, Blair. It
This
was
is-
awesome.
Yep,
it's super. Yep.
good enough. We'll talk to you again.
Okay. Thanks, Blair.
You're welcome.